Hello, and welcome back to the Projector Stories podcast. I don't know why I just said it like that. I am one of your hosts, Sarah, a 1-3 emotional projector.
Hi, I'm Lora. I'm a 5-1 splenic projector. My dog's barking already. It's already that type of episode.
Happy Mercury retrograde. And in this podcast, we are both right-minded, which if you understand human design, we basically have minds that are like wells, which means we are not strategic, but we have a lot of stuff that gets pulled out of us given the right set of circumstances. So if you are correct for us, then you will enjoy listening along to our conversation. And this has been quite the week already, and it's only Tuesday. Lora, do you have anything that has been happening within your own mind and heart and head, as I like to say, that we'd like to start our episode off with?
Well, I want to give you the chance to get us started because I feel like I go first every time. But I'll just say, hey, I'm here. I'm not at jury duty. So there's that, which Sarah knows. I got it transferred to an actual closer courthouse finally, but they did it at a week where I probably will be out of town. So I'm going to have to request a different date, which is, of course, like if it rains, it pours with the universe. But I'm here. So there's that. But Sarah, you have a lot to say, it seems, this week. It's because it's been a week and it's only Tuesday. So what has been going on for you that you care to share about?
Thanks. It's usually just the flow, so I appreciate you giving me access to opening comments. But it's just the way that when you are for me, like my
Since you
gate.
do the intro.
Yeah, to do the
I
intro.
feel like a mic hog because I talk for 30 minutes about myself in the beginning and it seems like a lot.
Have you timed it?
I noticed that like by the time I give you the mic, it's like 30 minutes in. I'm like, oh boy, there we go again.
Let it out. Let it out. You got a lot to say, it's nice to have somebody that recognizes you to talk to. And the one thing with me and Lora in this is that, we talked a little bit about my 1222 being a part of, well, not my 1222, my 12 and my bridge being the 22, having a desire to impact others and to share. But one thing that I've said before, and I'll say again, like if we weren't podcasting, I'd still be talking to Lora and sending her voice memos. Like this is basically in place of the voice memos that I would send you weekly. And so I figured,
but it's slightly filtered for her.
Slightly filtered, yes. I mean, we're not sharing certain things to be sure, but we're sharing those. We're being aware of what's filtered and sharing those separately with each other.
Are we being aware? I mean, we're right-minded, so.
Well, there's certain things that I certainly like. No matter how right-minded it is, I'm just like, I don't want to say this because this is recorded for public consumption and yada yada. But for the most part, we're kind of unfiltered. You're right. Between your Sagittarius sun and my,
I'm unfiltered for sure.
I mean, my personality sun and my design sun and moon is Sag. Yeah. So your girls are really unfiltered. But thank you for handing me over the mic, and congratulations on not having to go to jury duty this week, because this is not a week that I'd want to go to jury duty.
I know, which is part of like why I feel such a relief. Actually, I will say before I actually give you the mic, is something I told you, which I realized is just major root center, not self, undefined definition, whatever you want to call it. I can't even put words together. I wanted to get free of the pressure so much to the point where I was like going crazy inside my body. Like it was extreme. And since I've been living my life differently, my body can't handle pressure anymore. It seems like any small amount of pressure just puts me over the edge and I cannot deal. Like I have to, if I am to deal with pressure, I have to be invited and recognized to deal with said pressure. Me like just initiating and dealing with pressure, no. Me having to respond and deal with pressure, no. Like, please invite me and see if I can handle it. And even then, I remember, sorry, I'm doing it again, but I remember when I was invited and recognized to host my sister's showers, her bridal shower and her baby shower, I was not happy. I did not enjoy that. One, like, again, right mind, I'm extremely disorganized. But two, like, I had so much pressure to deal with, and I just like wanted it to be over, and it wasn't fun. And so even in situations where I am invited and recognized, I still don't like things that have time limits and pressure and all that. And yeah, it was major not self, like what to do. We're in the Maya. We can't hop out of the Maya, which is another thing. But Sarah, sorry, I'm taking the mic again.
No, there's no need to apologize. I think it's just interesting because the thing that I want to say from there too is that like there's all of these initiations that happen when you're deconditioning. Like I want to just point this out. It's not just like this super soft and subtle thing, because what ends up happening is you have to go against what basically every fiber of your being wants to do that's conditioned, right? So like there's all of these moments where your mind is telling you something, your body's going hyper vigilant, like all of these things are happening, and you have to do the opposite of what all of the bells and whistles in your physical self are doing in order to show yourself that you can make correct decisions and it doesn't lead to absolute like abject horror. And I think about that in terms of what I had said to you guys, as in you guys, as in the podcast listeners, and you, Laura, before, about how my PHS, following my PHS in the beginning, it was like so impossibly hard for me to not do to rock the boat. You know, it was so hard for me to rock the boat. And it wouldn't be hard for me if I didn't have that conditioning. It would just be normal. Like I'm just doing what's correct for myself. What's the big idea? You know, what's the big deal here? But when you're so used to the conditioning of, you know, needing to respond or needing to move at a specific pace, or having people put expectations on you and needing to fulfill them, and you follow, like you're so used to following along with it, it feels like you're breaking a covenant. You know, it feels like you're breaking something. It feels like something really wrong is happening. That's not to say that it is, but I just want to say there's no, in my mind, I have no beliefs that deconditioning is like this sweet unraveling that's just super calm and forgiving and nothing bad happens and everything's easy. And, you know, it's resistance is a natural part of deconditioning. The bitterness is what shows you if you're being incorrect as yourself, but the resistance is something that you have to come up against, because you're going to be resistant towards doing what's correct for yourself in the beginning. That resistance is not bitter resistance, right? It's leading you to a better outcome, but you know, you can't avoid resistance. You have to use bitter resistance as a guidepost of stepping into places and areas and into people's lives where you don't belong. But resistance in and of itself, like, this is grist for the mill. This is part of the deconditioning. So I just want to say, you know, with your open root center having been heavily conditioned to need to get things moving, you know, like get things done, your mind playing along with that conditioning, telling you got to get these things done. It's like going against that is not always easy, and it creates a lot of resistance internally. So that's not related to jury duty, but it is just a good moment for me to express that thought that I was having, because there's been moments where I'm like, this is all just, I'm being too extra. I'm being unnecessary. I'm being too problematic. You know, basically like making it hard for myself to take up space or feel good about taking up space, because it's not what I'm used to doing and it's not what people expect of me. So there's also all of these moments where you go against what the expectations are of you that you've been living in and living by for so long, when it comes to this deconditioning process of like, you have to break people's expectations. And that's hard too, you know, especially for tribal people. It's hard for me, and I'm fucking not tribal at all. I mean, I have some tribal gates, but I don't have any tribal channels. And so it is hard for me to, you know, to break that kind of tribal commitment. And you have your moon, your personality moon is tribal. So, you know, it's not easy.
No,
So give
but
yourself a little pat on the back. Go ahead.
it made me think of just like breaking the covenant. It seems like ideally it would be easiest if we could all just like snip ourselves out of our current lives and just enter into a new life and start fresh. That way there aren't anything like no bonds, no boundaries, no negotiations already in place holding us back from living our true selves. Because I feel like that's the hardest part is people in your life are used to you behaving a certain way. It's like the tribal energy, and then for you to all of a sudden behave differently, like it rubs people the wrong way, and
Big
it's
time.
really uncomfortable for them, for you, for everyone involved. And so it seems easiest to be like, peace out, I'm leaving, and to start fresh. And that way you can immerse yourself in you as you are in your definition. And then, you know, you become confident and more secure in that physical cellular process. And then you can go back and pretend to be your not self around your family members, which Ross said, like, whenever he would go back and visit his family, like they would see him as his old self. They don't get the new self, and they're never gonna. Like
Yep.
we are set in stone when it comes to family members, it seems, to a certain extent.
Yeah, well, and they're not on our they're not necessarily on our fractals. They don't see us.
Yeah, that too.
And so, yeah, I mean, and it's just, you're absolutely right. It would be way easier if we could snip our, like, we cut, copy, paste into a new format, just like generally speaking. And that's why this stuff is for children. You know, this is a whole fucking process, deconditioning. This is hard. And in every opportunity Ra gets, whenever he's talking, he talks about how difficult it is of an ordeal to enter into as an adult. And, you know, I think it's funny because I feel like in the beginning of all of this, like when I first really started committing to the process, which trust me, I wasn't really that committed, but like I had started sleeping in my own aura. I was like, oh, I'm going to be where I need to be in a year. And then that year I was like in hell the entire time. And then I'm like, okay, next year it's going to be better. Next year, total hell. Okay, next year is going to be better. Total hell. Like, I don't think that if I knew how much grit it was going to take for me to do this, I would have entered it so blasé, like just just like entering it, you know, without thinking about like the repercussions of this, because it's hard. It's hard on your system. It's hard. Everything about your life is melts away. Everything that's true about you melts away. Everything that you think is you melts away. And it's, yeah, I mean, this is not a commercial or an advertisement for deconditioning, but like, you know, for me, the person that I am now, despite a lot of my not self still being super active and doing a lot of shit, which is what I'm going to talk about today, like becoming who it is that I am, individuating, like there is no higher calling for me because of the way that, I mean, this is very cross of Eden of me. Like my ass got kicked out of my own innocence before I even knew what innocence was. And so it's not that I'm necessarily seeking my own innocence, but like innocence, sorry, different things, but I'm like, okay, it's not that I'm seeking my own innocence, but if you think about it, everyone who is kind of purely themselves, which there aren't that many of the people walking around, there's an innocence to them, you know, even if they have desire, motivation. It's like the quality of just being who it is that you are, to me, is like the best. It's like the highest thing that you can become. So, you know, this is the right path for me, but it's hard. And I've already had what many would consider a hard life. So um it's not, but it's, you know, it's just, this thing is, this whole path, this whole situation, not for everyone. Like I've said many times before, 4% of 4%, you know, people that actually have the mutative potential within their, you know, their physical form to become who it is that they are, to individuate. So hopefully I have it. Hopefully I have it. And hopefully if I don't have it, then these conversations are at least interesting and helpful to people who do. But yeah, there's two things that happened, like really pretty much like as soon as Mercury retrograde started. So let me just say, it's Mercury retrograde out and or I'm sorry, it's Mercury retrograde and we're 1 week out from a solar eclipse that's happening in America. I've said this before, I'll say it again. What's it called? There's been a state of an emergency that was what's that giant waterfall? Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls issued a state of emergency because so many people are going to Niagara Falls for the eclipse. And I'm like, nothing good can happen there. I'm like, don't go there. Why are you going there? Because they want to make sure that they have enough, basically like EMTs and police and fire trucks and everything that you need when shit hits the fan. They have all of that getting set up for the eclipse because so many people have booked travel to that location. And, you know, the other thing that's happening on top of it is 2 days after the eclipse, we're going to have a conjunction where Mars and Saturn are going to conjoin in Pisces. It's actually in the 23, which I think is interesting. And the eclipse is happening in the 51, which is shock. I mean, that's the keynote for it. So, yeah, I mean, this is a heavy week leading into eclipse season, and I am, as I would have expected, you know, with this Mercury retrograde. It's interesting because Mercury is retrograding over my natal Venus. My natal Venus is such a hot spot for me. And this is also an argument, by the way, everyone, for the gates that you have in defined in undefined centers, like being really important just as far as the evolution of your life goes. Because every time something happens to that Venus by transit, some shit goes on, you know, like something happens, some realization happens, something comes to light, some information comes out. And that's kind of what happened because, okay, so on the one hand, I guess I'll start with I had a healing today, and it was from someone who does energy healing. So I had an energy healing today, and I have stomach issues, which I've talked at length on the podcast about. And in the healing, she basically said to me that I am hyper-vigilant, that my cells are hyper-vigilant, that they're always tense. She said that there's a lot of chaos in my solar plexus. And basically, like, what is true is that I'm like clenching against life. Like I'm tightening and I'm resisting life because of the way that I was conditioned as a really young kid. Again, the first 7 years of conditioning are like the most bananas ones that you really are working with. Like that's the conditioning beyond all of the other conditioning. That's the root conditioning that you have to contend with if you want to be able to make decisions as yourself. And so I have this hypervigilance within my body where I cannot relax. Like, it's not a joke. When I was saying, let's switch nervous systems to Lora because she has nervous touch and I have calm touch, it was like not a joke. I'm like, please take this thing. It's always, and you know, you'd expect that with a left body, but like for me, it's always and everywhere because of the way that I was raised. I was raised in a very emotionally chaotic environment, and I was homeschooled, and I was an only child until I was 5.5. So I was really, really not in control or autonomous in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I was really open because I have wide open ego, wide open G center, wide open spleen, super conditioned by those centers because my mom has 2 of them defined. And she is emotionally chaotic. You know, I was always my body, my physical body's aura was constantly feeling around, trying to get a sense on like how to make this crazy lady okay. And so what my body and my aura does now is I'm always checking around the environment, and I have social anxiety because I need to know like what everyone that's around me is up to in order to feel okay. And I have the sense that as I decondition and I start making more and more decisions as myself, that kind of hypervigilance will minimize. Um, at least that's the hope. But, what I've realized, especially because Saturn is a part of my emotional definition, my authorities definition, is that when I put myself in situations in which I do not belong there, out of my, my need to prove my worth, my search for love and direction, holding on to things that aren't good for you, all of the open centers that I have more than that, but those are the three like completely open ones. I get punished into a state of more extreme hypervigilance. So it's like I'm already not relaxed as it is, but when I put myself into situations that amplify that, I'm basically punished by my emotional authority, because Saturn is where you get punished for not behaving according to the laws of your own physical being. And so I started to see that like my my system, my body, my cells, the issue is in my tissues, the cells of my digestive system are tightened. They're tightened up against life. They're not ever calm. And so that's why it's like if you could imagine yourself tightening a specific muscle to an extreme extent every single day, every hour of the day that you're awake, for most of your life, you would think, damn, that muscle's going to be super sore. Like that muscle's not in good shape because it's so overactivated, and now it's throwing off about 10 other systems in your body. So I say all that because basically it gave me the realization that, anyone that takes me either, I'm going to be hyper vigilant as just a physical reaction to my conditioning until I decondition more. But anyone who increases that in my system is not correct for me. Um, and places that I go where that is increased in my system aren't correct for me. I'm a cave person, which is like the ultimate security driven body. Like, and I'm also left body, which means my body's always hyper aware of security and things like that. So like I'm really not here to be out in the public aura. Like that's not my trip. And given specific transits and things of that nature, there is that. But like I've always been inserting myself places where I don't belong in order to prove my worthiness or searching for love or whatever the thing might be. And um, I'm going to pause right now because I want to see if Lora has anything to say on that, because then I'm going to jump into something else that was the second realization from this Mercury retrograde. But Lora, do you have any thoughts on what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, not happy thoughts. It's more like you are living your life as it's meant to be lived with the chaos and crisis that you described. Like you said, like your childhood was chaotic and full of crisis because you were trying to appease your mother, but is not that your role with 36 and 6? And I'm thinking of them particularly with the gene keys sense of like those are the two shadows. I'm like, no, we're not supposed to constantly live in the shadows, but we embrace and integrate the shadows. And for you, it's your life's work and evolution, which is crisis and conflict. Right? Or crisis and chaos. I don't remember what the words are. It's all the C words, all the C words. But it makes like what you said about like you get punished if you don't wait out your authority and you don't allow the right crisis and the right conflict to come into your experience, then you get punished with your emotional authority in Saturn. But that's not to say that you're meant to live a life of peace.
No.
Sucks. But at the same time, like you have an undefined spleen, and like I could not fathom how people exist with undefined spleens. Really, like it must be so hard. Like I with my defined spleen already, like I hold on to things that aren't good for me and I'm aware of it. I know when I feel safe and when I don't feel safe in my body, but like imagine to always have that unnerved feeling inside of you, to like never feel totally secure in your physical form, and like the ease of that and just having to exist as a human. It just must be so hard. And I am sorry, but like there's nothing I can do about it. That's your trip, your experience. Um, but yeah, it's just those are my thoughts. Not very great thoughts of just like, wow, your life is your life. Cool. It must suck. But at
Yeah,
the
no,
same
I
time,
mean, totally agreed. And like the thing about me is that as a projector, I'm here to be recognized and invited for my 36-1 and my 6-1, which is to be able to handle and be secure within crisis and within conflict, right? So, like, if I'm getting invited into a situation and I'm recognized as someone who's going to be able to hold it down basically, which I am that person, and it's correct for me, it's like, yeah, it's correct for me. Like I know I'm not going to escape that. I don't think I'm going to escape that, but it's all of the decisions that I've made incorrectly when it comes to those types of things, like somebody's supposed to come in and say, like, recognize Sarah, like, come here, not Sarah go out into the world and run and find the crisis that her mind, wants to be a part of, find the conflict, that her mind wants to be a part of. And it's that gets me into trouble. It's like not the crisis and conflict in and of itself, right? And so I agree with you for sure in the sense of, a third body is very resilient. That's what my body is. So I have a lot of faith in my body. But I think that the feeling that I have, the tightening that I have, is a response, in fact, to bitterness of not being myself. And it's conditioned around my earliest life because I was conditioned to do things that were not correct for myself in order to placate the caregivers that I had, which, there's no choice, which that's a whole nother thing. And so it's not like I'm here to tell a story about how it is for me and how it always will be and everything sucks and whatever, but it is to recognize, like, for me, that as long as I'm entering into things incorrectly, I'm going to feel it. It's going to prevent me from further unraveling from my conditioning, because it's not the fact that I was in a kind of shitty situation as a kid. It's the fact that I identified with it and not what is my true frequency that creates the problem, right? It's the over identification with the openness. It's the over identification with what isn't you that creates the issue. It's not the fact that you're ever going to be able to go throughout life without being conditioned. We're projectors. We're literally here to be conditioned. Something interesting that I heard, I can't remember where it was, right mind, is that, like, the projector, oh, this is from Rob. The projector aura is actually, like, everyone's like, oh, they're so precious, whatever. When our aura is focused on someone, it's very difficult for us to be conditioned at the same time. So it's like when we're hyper focused on someone, it's like there's a block almost. Like when our aura is in somebody else's G center, it's like there's almost a block to our own conditioning, like, because our aura is all absorbed in it, which, that's a total aside, not related to anything that I want to say, but that was like kind of was the opposite of what I had heard from Rob before, which is that we're like really precious and so sensitive and like just so like deeply conditioned. And we are, but just the fact that the aura is in fact um not as super precious because of the way that it points out, um and it can burrow into someone else. So yeah, that's another aside, but still not related to my final point. Laura, do you want to say anything?
I think it's really interesting. I mean, it makes sense. Like every aura has its own like mechanism for protection. And so we protect ourselves by not focusing on ourselves. And when we
Yeah,
turn the energy inward, that's when we get conditioned. It makes sense.
yeah, it does make sense. It's yeah, it's and that's also where, I get the feeling that it's not for us to be like trying to, you know, do all of these backflips and do all of this stuff in order to get noticed. It's just like when we, because that's us trying to put our aura back into ourselves to see what we're supposed to be doing in order to be incorrect, in order to get recognized. And it's like, that's, you know, that's not it. It's just like strategy and authority, clean up your aura, stop making decisions with your not self. And this brings me into the point that I wanted to make. I've talked to you guys about this on the podcast before, but I entered into a Living Your Design class, and when I first entered into it, when I first wanted to do it, the Living Your Design course, it was like, I want to take this because I'm thinking about becoming an analyst, like certified through IHDS. And I really want to learn how to live my design because I understand all the theoretical stuff. I understand the mechanics. I've listened to hours and hours and days and months and fucking so much raw, that I understand the basic mechanics of all of the things, but I want to like learn how to actually live it, because obviously that's where things get a little bit tricky. And so I wanted to enter a Living Your Design class, and like arguably I did not wait out my wave with that decision. Now, I couldn't make the decision immediately because there was none that were being offered when I first wanted to do it. But then when the time came around secondly, I kind of jumped at it. And where was this desire coming from? You know, where is this desire? Where is it coming from? You know, because it seems like a normal enough thing to want to do as a projector who likes to study human design, to take a human design course. Well, what I realized, like lo and behold, is that the desire was coming from my open G center looking for like direction, and my open ego trying to prove my worth. So that's where the desire was coming from, that I did not really fully recognize, or I was unwilling to admit to myself. And so I started the class, and like, just to say, the people who are taking the class are lovely. There's nothing inherently wrong with the class, but like as I kept taking the class, I realized that in the class, and actually, well, let me just say, in the class, like I feel more hyper vigilant than usual. I feel more like I need to prove my worth. I feel more like I need to speak up. I feel more like I need to get recognized. I feel all of that like icky old conditioning of like the projector, see me, see me, see me, jumping up and down, trying to be seen kind of energy. Now it's a projectors only class, so like that's kind of the vibe. Like that's kind of, is it like the entry level projectors only class? Like that's kind of the vibe. That's kind of like how you'd expect to enter into it anyway. But for me, like I'm in a sense beyond that stage in my deconditioning process. And so instead of it being super illuminating for me, it's more highlighting my own not self tendencies to me. And so I recognized, oh wow, like I don't belong here. Like this isn't my fractal, and this isn't, like, beyond the information being interesting, it's like this isn't my fractal, and this isn't the right location for my body, and my body's going into this state of hypervigilance, like an extreme level, while I'm here, even if it is online, because it's wrong. And so that was a realization that I had on basically day one of Mercury retrograde, of like, I don't belong in this live class, you know? Um, so I'm not going to be taking it live anymore. I may watch the replays. I'm not sure yet, but it was just like for a right-minded person who like already understands the basics of human design, to like watch where my motivations were coming from, and to see like when my motivation, like, and I don't mean that in the human design motivation sense, but like in the not self centers sense, to see where they were coming from, it was just really enlightening to me, because I was like, holy shit, like I've been lying to myself about what is the reason that I'm doing things, so that I can get away with doing things that go against my own strategy and authority. Laura, do you have anything to say on that?
I don't know. Well, there's the stuff we talked about on the side, which I don't know if I should repeat what I said to you before or not, but you keep extrapolating, and then I'll wait to see what wants to come out of me.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is there's a lot of details that I'm not going to get into on the podcast for good reason, but like at the end of, and like I said before, it's not and there's nothing wrong with the class. Like the class is fine. I have my own anarchistic view of the way that classes should run, but that's really irrelevant to whether or not it's a good class. It's just the fact that like where I am, and this was actually also interestingly enough today, somebody asked in the projectors group, like, how do we handle being in a group as projectors? Do we not enter into the group, or do we just not talk at all? Like that's what was that was the question. And Kuhn, who's the moderator and the admin for the projectors group, was like, when I'm in a group, I'm either guiding the group or I'm not saying anything unless I'm invited, because if I say something and I'm not invited, then nobody's going to hear it anyway. And that's basically like mentally what I was seeing for myself, of like me wanting it to either be one-on-one or me wanting it to be me being invited to speak, when like that's not the nature of this particular course. And and it's like, you know, I could argue that like maybe no group classes are for me, but I don't think that's quite it, because Kuhn also said that like if the class has something that I want to learn, then it's also, you can be in it and just not talk and just listen and pay attention, which I get that as a line one. Like that's basically how I learn, is just listening to what people are saying. But yeah, it was just funny that like as I had this realization, this question was also being thrown into the projectors group of like, well, how do you handle a group setting as a projector? Because we do, it's either you recognize me and that's when I can actually feel success, or it's one-on-one, and so there's just an easier kind of back and forth, or I'm just learning, which I'm just sitting back and it's just intriguing to me and it's just interesting and I'm not adding any of my input. So, but it's interesting too, because like in a sense with this class, you know, I'm not invited to speak other than like the kind of stock invitations that everyone gets to like ask questions. And I don't think that, like, you know, the nature of the class is that it's a smaller group, it's a smaller community, it's like very intimate, there's like less than 10 of us, so it would be strange for me to not speak, but then I find myself being like, well, I'm not going to just speak because it's strange that I don't speak. And that's when it all came to me of like, this isn't the right place for you. Like it's not right. Like you are in the wrong environment. So yeah, I mean, those are my two interesting things that kind of like bled into each other. Very Aries North Node, mind you. Very much of like directing me back to myself and realizing that my attempts to kind of be a part of the group, be a part of the external world, to reach, to go beyond myself, right? Very trying to emotionally manifest things where I don't have bridge gates that are defined there. Is just incorrect. And like I do really like truly need to just wait for an invitation for things. Like I can't insert myself places anymore, and I'm not going to do so. So that was like the kind of, it wasn't a harsh lesson. It wasn't as harsh as like some of the lessons that I've learned over the past year, but it was a very clear lesson of like, I don't belong here. And it's not because there's anything wrong with anyone. It's like the geometry's off, and so I don't I'm in the wrong geometry, and I'm trying to insert myself because I want to have direction, or I want to prove myself, or whatever the thing is. So yeah, it's just Laura was saying, wait, what did you say to me? It's like I did learn something about living your design, but it wasn't because of the course material. So it was definitely worth the investment. Like, I just want to like say that too. Like, totally worth the investment. I'm not mad about it. It was just like, oh, okay, this is the truth of what it is, and now I understand how to function more properly as I move forward. But yeah, that's kind of it for my long monologue about just Mercury retrograding over my Venus in 42, and the kind of shenanigans that have been eclipse season for me so far. Laura, do you want to touch on anything about what I just said, or do you want to tangent it off to somewhere else?
Yeah, it's just I feel like I don't have conscious access to my brain right now, so I don't know how these thoughts are gonna come out. But because like even when
Do
you
we
were saying,
ever? Do we ever?
I feel like I don't know, my throat gates are conscious throat gates. So usually yes, I would. I mean, even with the right mind, but like right now, it's just like there's not a correct syncopation happening with like the things that I'm gonna say, I don't think, in the way I'm thinking them, or like the thoughts aren't happening, therefore I don't know what's going to come out. Maybe that's it. That like the words are going to come out, but there's like no conscious thoughts behind them. I don't know. Anyways, um, even but like even as you first sent me the first audio message talking about this, like I felt similarly, like I responded to you, but I was just like blah blah blah, blah with my thoughts. So the just I just don't know where to begin. That's the issue. The idea of entering into a class correctly as a projector like is a thing in and of itself of something I told you in response to what you were saying before, which I'll repeat, is you aren't there to be recognized. Like as a student in a class, you're not there looking, or like the we shouldn't be there. It's not that you're not there, but like we shouldn't be there looking for recognition as projectors, being in that role of a student, because as students, we are, if the teacher is a projector, we are recognizing and inviting that teacher to be the projector of the group, to guide the group. And so that looking for recognition, I feel like is another piece of just like with what Kuhn said, you know, either you're invited to guide the group or you're just sitting and watching and waiting to be called on and being recognized. Um, but like you said, like the energy of the group is not self-projectors wanting attention, like bobbing their hands up and down, like, look at me, look at me. Um, so it creates ripples of trouble, but that's not what I wanted to say. I don't know what I want to say. I want to say something. I just don't know what I want to say. And it's hard to focus my brain right now. Um,
Mercury retrograde,
yeah.
baby.
Yes. Something, I guess, tangent, sort of, something tangential to say is how you started, which was like part of you wanted to prove yourself and like for direction by like potentially doing IHTS certified analyst thing. And so this is like the stepping stone to get there, right? Of like that's being strategic, wanting like not being invited to look for to be analyst, but like wanting that for yourself. And that's something I've been thinking about today. So if maybe it's just the neutrino weather that's affecting our thoughts. But I was thinking about the dilemma with projectors of like if we're by the book correct, then we are invited into a system to master it and then to be later recognized and invited to guide others based on that system that we were initially invited to master in the first place. And a lot of us aren't invited to master systems. No one invited us to study human design other than ourselves. And same with astrology. Like it's the line one self-motivated investigative quality that is part of us, but it's not the projector way of being recognized and then being able to slide in. And um, that's something I wanted to talk about, but I'll bring up projector slide later. And so then it brings this dilemma of just like the only true projectors that are there to actually be analysts are the ones that were recognized by the people to be analysts, who were invited to go through the system to learn and to be certified in such a way. And it made me laugh because in the projector group, I don't know which group, Was it? I don't know, but it was within the past 5 days or so. Someone commented like, "How do we become a certified analyst in 3 months or less?" It's just like, oh boy, um, you can do it the non-IHDS way and like just go to a random person who's probably doing the whole pop HD, but like, it just why would you want to? Like, but it's like we say this, but we were giving out ratings from before we were deeper into our system, our deconditioning process. Uh, but it's like it takes time to decondition and the cellular process to unfold, and it's like you can't really guide other people correctly unless you are deep in the cellular process of one deconditioning if you're guiding people with human design or anything else. Like it takes time for your body to create the muscular and cellular memory to become a master of something. And anyways, to tangent, like I've been feeling bitter today. Well, going back to last week, chronically bitter, but today I was able to pinpoint a flavor of this particular bitterness, which is like bitterness that I haven't been invited to master something in such a way. But then, like, as I was thinking about it, it's not self-centers of like proving yourself, of the root center evolution. Like, I feel like I haven't accomplished enough with my life. I feel like I am not where I'm supposed to be, that I'm lacking direction, like all these not self names, and yet they're bringing bitterness. And I just thought that was interesting. It's like, it's not that I'm not doing anything, I'm waiting. And yet, in this waiting, my not self is happy thinking that it's supposed to be what it's not. And therefore, it's feeling bitter about the life and the form and the existence. But the root of said bitterness is the not self, and it's not the true self. It's not that I did anything to make the bitterness come about. It's that I didn't do anything and I'm bitter about it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no,
But
just to say, like, the not self is the only thing that's capable of being bitter. Like, that's like, that's it. You know, I was thinking about that walking when I'm having this thought about this person and this person's a son of a bitch and whatever, yada yada. It's my not self because I'm holding myself to a conditioned standard, or I'm holding the situation to a conditioned standard, or I'm thinking about it through the filters of my openness and I'm getting bitter over it. And so, you know, something that Marianne Winiger said that I will repeat, that I may have repeated on a few podcasts ago, but you know, she said her mind no longer disturbs her, but in the beginning her mind was disturbing her all the time. You know, your mind will make you bitter. It totally will. Like, we're not there yet. And so it's not, you know, it's not just because we're entering into situations incorrectly that creates bitterness necessarily. It's all the pattern conditioned thinking, the measurements that the mind has that says you're not as good at this as this person, you're not as good at that person. You know, all of those things that start turning your mental wheels, that start getting you kind of up in a tizzy, that create like a chemical reaction in your body that, yeah, it can be bitterness. I wouldn't say it's like the extreme version of bitterness. It's like the low level bitterness that we just kind of get stuck in after, like, when we're deconditioning. And to repeat something that was from the class, it's like the bitterness has to come up. It has to come up. It has to be let out, because you're talking about years and years and years of living incorrectly as yourself. Like, there's a lot of bitterness that's layered on top of, like, itself, within your physical aura, basically. So nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. It's more like making decisions because you're bitter about not, being where you want to be in life, that creates like the bigger issues in life. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. And it makes sense. And it's just like, it's so cyclical, life. I like to think of, well, I used to think of life. I don't know if I still think about it this way. Like, life is a black hole now. But I used to think about life as a spiral staircase of like, you're always climbing up, but you're just going around and around and around. And it's like, you have moments in your deconditioning process where you come to conclusions. You're like, I see it. I see my not self behavior. I can call it for what it is and I cannot let it affect me. And then you like resolve that issue and you heal it and you're like, okay. And then you're good for a few moments. And then poof, like you're walking through the cycle of life and you're back at that same place and the same previous thoughts and patterns come up. And it's just like the fresh wound reopened. Um, and you think like I thought I already outgrew this and like overcame it and dealt with this, but no, here we are again feeling the same thoughts, which I know Sarah throughout this episode you've talked about, you know, it's hard in the beginning, but and like you said with Marianne Winnegar, like her mind doesn't torment her anymore, but I feel like it's not just beginning versus many years later that we're not left, or like a few years later that we're not in torment anymore. I feel like it's a very long and slow process of cyclical patterns being repeated over and over. Because, you know, Sarah and I aren't in the beginning. Like, we're not 3 months in, we're several years in at least of deconditioning. And not only that, like, there's like some people out on the internet that will say like I started deconditioning before human design because they went through this spiritual journey and that spiritual
No.
journey. And sure, like maybe that was part of their deconditioning journey and they've had parallel experiences of living their design versus living their not self that went hand in hand with whatever else they experienced. um, which is to say, like, Sarah and I have been self-aware, not necessarily living our deconditioned life, but like we've been self-aware for a good majority of our lives. Not maybe a majority, but like a very long time. And so it's not like we're baby lambs put into this like new world where
No.
everything is different than how we were operating before. Like we're seasoned to a certain
Yep.
extent with self-awareness to be able to notice ourselves and look at ourselves and see our patterns, just to say, you know, we're not newborn lambs, and yet still like it often feels like you are a newborn lamb no matter what stage you are in, because you walk back over that point in the spiral staircase and the wound reopens, it's ripped apart, and you're like, ugh, I have to deal with this again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Well said. And we are, what I'm realizing, yeah, you keep going over the same things until you get the lesson. And one of the things that I realized within all of this is that, um as far as I'm concerned and as far as what I've seen experienced outside of me, is like I'm watching people who are not self, and what they do is they play the same game, and they do the mental Olympics trying to put themselves in it in a slightly different way, or do more positive affirmations or whatever the thing is, but they're playing the same game where they don't belong. They're like, okay, I want to basically win the game. Their not self wants to win the game that their true self doesn't belong in. And so instead of exiting the game, they keep trying to show up to the game slightly differently. And that's basically the whole not self world in a nutshell. Like for me, what I realized with this, I was watching my mind going up and down of like, how can I be seen in this class? How can I be recognized? All of that stuff. And then I realized this is not my game. And if I'm trying to show up slightly differently so that I can talk in a specific way, so that I say things that come across correct, or that I ask the right questions or whatever, like that's just me, my not self, trying to do like mental gymnastics around how I can win a game that I was never meant to play. And that reminds me of all open ego people in general. But like that's basically what a lot of people come to you with, especially when they're like fresh off the boat, excuse the term, of their not self. They're coming
Newborn
to,
lambs.
yes, I want this. I want my life to be like this. I want my life. Yeah, it's like your not self wants all of that. And the longer you play the game, the more bitter you're going to become, if you're a projector specifically, at the fact that you're still getting the same old stories that play out from you trying to play that game. And so, like, for me, it's taken me many rounds on the merry-go-round, many, 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 of going over the same tired situations over and over again, inserting myself in the same places that I don't belong, trying to be seen in the same ways that they're not on my fractal and they don't recognize me, in order for me to finally be like seeing all of the nuances of it, in every single situation, like how my not self is driving the storyline forward within a story that I've never belonged in. And so I'm never going to come out as the hero in a story that I don't belong in. You know what I mean? So, just to say, like, I totally understand what you're saying, because it's not just that the person that you start this with changes, it's that the person that you start the deconditioning process with is obliterated. And it's obliterated by you having to walk down the same paths over and over again in slightly nuanced and differentiated ways, to see how in every turn your not self is trying to run your life and trying to make decisions for you. And it's not like when you start deconditioning, it's like all of your decisions are made correctly. It's when you start being aware that you're making decisions incorrectly, but you still can convince yourself of all kinds of things, especially in the beginning, about the fact that this decision was correct because of this, that, and the other thought that I'm having, even though it's not self-decision. And so it's not like, okay, I'm deconditioning, all of my decisions are correct. That's like an absolute fallacy. It's I'm deconditioning, so I'm paying attention to my authority and my bitterness when I go through situations, and seeing what comes out in the wash at the end of them, and then slightly course correcting for the next decision that looks very similar to my last one. And so you're not like, eventually you get to where I am now, which I would not have been here when I first entered into the experiment and started sleeping alone, is like, oh shit, I'm trying to play a game that's not even my fucking game. Like, I need to get the fuck out of this game entirely, because it's, again, my mind thinking that it knows where my life is supposed to go. And as Ra always says, helpless and incompetent. And I'm like just really settling into that. And I'm sure more of the vanities of my mind will continue to be exposed to me. But I completely agree. And I also just want to say, like, as far as the whole kind of rigmarole of like IHDS and certification and analyst training and blah 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 blah, and like also just like the wild wild west of the human design, like out in the wild, like people on different social media platforms, it's just about fractals. Like, someone's going to learn about human design through a person that has basically nothing to do with their true frequency, because the person just likes talking about it because it's catchy and it's cool and it's a tool for making your life smoother. And so it's like, I think probably the person that I learned about human design from was like full of shit. It's not it's not like they were deconditioned at all. And it's just a fractal thing. So it's not to say like, oh, this person or that person or whatever like is not deconditioned and so they shouldn't be talking about human design. It's just like whoever, you're going to learn about it from who you learn about it from. And then whether or not you dive into what is actually true about it, whether you dive into the part of it where you really are able to understand what it means to individuate, like that's a whole other mutative situation that's going on internally for you. But yeah, Laura.
I have a lot of little thoughts. I
Okay.
don't know if I can remember all of them.
Good old gate
because
9, baby.
because then you hop on one train and then it goes in a direction and you lose the others. One was like I saw a post in the group, one of the groups, whatever. It's called the internet is now the group. It's like the entirety of the internet in the group. I saw a post was like, you play not self games, you win not self prizes. And I
It's a
feel
good
like that
post.
is exactly what Sarah's been saying, and she just explains it so well. So there's that. Um, I wanted to like cycle back and touch on you being hyper vigilant in your class, like how like your body is really uncomfortable, and I feel like there's something there, but I don't remember what I wanted to say about that. But that's there.
Mhm.
Oh, maybe that was so. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but I was cut off at some point due to receiving a call, and I realized the thing that I didn't say that I wanted to say was, um, I noticed that it's a lot easier to be natural in the body, like with our body's design in person. And as soon as we're online, or interacting with other people virtually, like it just gives the mind so many opportunities, and the personality so many opportunities to hijack the process and try to take over and like decide things. So it makes you think about like online classes, right? If you were in person, well, who's to say like projectors in person? I guess, you know, Kuhn said how he operates in groups, but like now when I'm in groups, I am more likely not to say anything unless someone asks me something directly. Like I'm the person that will shut up in the group. And I don't think I always used to be that way. It's hard. Like I don't have a very good progressive memory. Like I know my reality right now and that's about it. And I don't remember anything of the past, typically. That's how my spleen operates. But in these group settings, it's very rare for like me to be the verbal gunslinger nowadays and to like look for that attention and to shout things out, or try to answer someone's question or do this or that. It's rare. Um, Probably because of experiences with previous happenings and bitterness and like it not going well or like not being heard and then someone else taking your idea, this, that, and the other thing. And so it just makes me think about like the class that Sarah's in and how it's virtual and how it's personalities hanging out and not bodies hanging out,
Mhm.
and how things would be different if it was in person. Oh, I remembered something I wanted to say before, which was how it's a living your design class. And Sarah was asking, like, I thought we were supposed to be, living our designs, and like there's people who are behaving as their not selves and this, that. And I was thinking, like, I thought immersions were for like actually living out the body's design, because in an immersion, you're in person interacting with other people's auras. So you can be a projector and just sit in the corner and wait for someone to come approach you. And you can't really do that in an online space, because, there's the whole like there's one microphone on at a time. Um, but so, you know, in any sort of class, like you have people who are there to learn the material who don't know that they're being not self. But again, I feel like that's cycling back, something that I wanted to cycle forward. Cycle forward. I don't know where these trains are going, but to cycle forward for a bit. I was thinking about projector slides and how ideally, in an ideal world, we're meant to slide in and out and have an ease of experience. And this sort of relates to, already forgot what you were just saying. It related somehow. I don't know where the tangent, like where the bridge is from one thought process to another. But
Normal.
I was thinking about how like we are in this modern day world, in this modern day society where we have money as a currency of exchange of energy. And it is the way the Maya operates, and we are beholden to it. And that means that as projectors, for us to slide in and out of experiences, part of that exchange of resources and energy is usually in forms of money and currency. Yes, it is just like physical energy being around people, but a lot of times, like in order to be able to slide, to be able to live our lives correctly and to have ease, we need certain resources in order to manage that. Because, projectors came into the world 1781. At that point, like we're long off the barter system. We were well into the age of currency, and it was part of how the Maya operates. Um, and thoughts, it was something about the Maya and the program, and just like no matter what you do, trying to be yourself, like the program's always there and you're always beholden to it and you always have to navigate through it and you project your slide through the program. But again, I don't remember what you were just saying, Sarah, to make me think about this stuff. Something about
Um,
like living, just like projector individuality and like actually being a projector and like living your design. I don't know. Do you remember what you were saying like 10 seconds ago plus?
Oh my God, 10 seconds ago plus you were talking.
No, well, that's a exaggeration. Like what the
Okay,
last time you
okay.
were
The last
talking.
thing that I was talking about um was just how the the not self game, like being involved in games that aren't your games. And so, I don't know exactly how it relates. The
Okay.
way that I was putting it together in my head with what you were saying, it's just that, like, yeah, we're meant to slide, and when we're not sliding, when we're having all of this, like, we're having all of this, like, interference in the frequency, um, it's because we've inserted ourselves somewhere where we don't belong, and we're addicted to doing so. That's what the not self is, but I'm not sure.
Maybe it was that the program's always going to have its default to our not self.
Yeah,
Because the program needs not selves to perpetuate itself.
yeah.
So it's just like our default setting of like you were saying how it was a great point you made before 10 seconds ago. Everything is right now and 10 seconds ago. That's like my understanding of time. But you were saying something along the lines of, oh boy, I already forgot it. Come on, brain, you can think thoughts. Um, oh, I don't know what you were saying. It was so good. It was so good. I'll have to re-listen because I can't bring it up.
More to come next week, everybody. No, there was so many. Look, there was a lot of points made there, but yeah, the projector slide is just something that I really, it's just funny because you can see people in the Facebook group. Maybe something will come to you as I'm talking, but you can see people in the Facebook group who are like trying to wiggle their way, the projectors group, into it not being wait for the invitation and waiting for the invitation. And don't get it twisted. Like, I'm never going to stop studying because physically it's correct for me to study, but it's correct for me to study in the way that my body studies. And it doesn't do its best work in groups. I'm a one. Like, I do my best work studying by myself, just learning and absorbing information alone. Like, it's a very, like, I don't want to say lonely, but it's a very insular process for me of learning. And so it's not like I'm going to like wait until somebody invites me to learn, because my mind just works, and it needs to absorb things. It's always, 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 always taking things in. But when it comes to like other people in any capacity, and this is maybe especially true for me because my design earth is the 6. Like, I don't belong putting myself literally anywhere with other people unless I'm recognized and invited, or I have the wherewithal within my own understanding of my own conditioning to like know that when I'm being my not self, like I'm being my not self and it's not me. So it's, I don't know. I'm not sure what you were going to say because you were talking about the projector slide, and I don't know.
I think it would, again, like you have the thoughts and the words, but I can't repeat them for whatever reason. But I think it's like even though you can recognize your not self tendencies, your mind's still gonna try to make decisions. Like the mind is always gonna, like the not self mind is always gonna try to make decisions from
Yeah.
itself and not from being invited. And the program's always gonna poke us and prod us to participate in it and make decisions from the mind. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just it's not a coherent thought, but it's thoughts. It's like a child like drawing scribbles and like being like, look at this beautiful rainbow, and it's like not a rainbow. It's just a bunch of scribbles.
I'm like,
That's like my
that's
thought right now.
literally how I think. So you're in good company. But yeah, that's definitely the not self mind will at every turn. And this is the thing, you don't get rid of it. The volume supposedly is just going down.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. That is the great release, is not that it ever stops badgering you to basically do the program's bidding. Your not self is badgering you to do the not self bidding. It's just that the volume's down and you stop listening to it, and eventually you stop listening to it enough that your decisions become more self. And this is why, like, as much as I think that when it comes to like the major life decisions, when you start deconditioning, you better well really follow your authority. Like, when it comes to other decisions that are kind of more like medium decisions or small to medium decisions, it's like you're not going to make decisions correctly. Like you're going to start out not making decisions correctly in your deconditioning journey because you don't even know what it means to be yourself. And so there has to be just some understanding of it, like given in the process, which is probably why I felt like the projectors group was like harsh in the beginning, because I'm like, damn, they're really just like serving people their asses when they're coming in here, like not deconditioned. And maybe it is, I don't know, it's not for me to say, you know, again, it's not my trip. Like I'm a 1-3, I'm not a 5 or a 4, I'm not transpersonal at all. So I don't know what's correct for the kind of great majority, but um you're just not going to be right. You're not going to be right in the beginning because you've been living as your not self for so long. And to think that you're just going to flip the switch of like, okay, now I'm deconditioning. Now all of my decisions are going to be made correctly as myself. It's like, that's not what deconditioning is. And I don't feel like people get that enough, because what ends up happening is we get so afraid of making decisions incorrectly. And it's like, bitch, you're going to make them incorrectly. Like you're not cells still. You're half your cells, 70% of your cells, 60, 50, 40% of your cells are still your not self. And until the tides turn, until the scales tip, the decisions are going to be very like influenced by what it is that you aren't. So, you know, again, I'm not an argument to make not self decisions, especially with bigger ones, but just like understanding, not getting frozen by decisions, because like you're gonna fuck up. You're gonna fuck it up. You've been fucking it up. You've been fucking up being yourself your whole life. So, yeah, I don't know.
Optimistic.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Neither do I. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about. I can hear you, but I can't hear myself. So
I know, same. Like, yeah, you make sense, Laura. But yeah, that was just like, I don't know. I felt like it was a very Aries North Node 51 like realization for me to have of, oh my God, all of the things that have made me bitter have been when I'm playing in somebody else's playground. You know, the term that I wanted to say was not my monkeys, not my circus. And it's like, that's such a funny term, but like but like that's what I was thinking. Like when I'm in the wrong place, especially with my open G, it's like trying to act like these are my monkeys and this is my circus. It's not, and I don't belong here. And so it's just, yeah, I mean, realizing that when you're in a lot of bitterness, or you're dealing with bitter resistance, you're not recognized, you know, you're not sliding, you're feeling hyper vigilant in your body, if that's your thing, like whatever it is that's giving you the bells and whistles that like something's off, it's because it's not your monkeys and it's not your circus. And like I said, I've seen the people in my life who are not self go over the same tracks over and over and over and over again, getting pissed off, angered at the same old tired situations, because they are addicted to whatever the chemistry of those situations are within their not self, and wanting to prove themselves, or whatever the open center's themes are, that they can't even recognize, like, oh, I need to stop inserting myself in this. And don't get it twisted, it is an addiction. It's an addiction to keep inserting yourself places where you don't belong, trying to prove yourself. It's like, this time I'll prove myself, that time I'll prove myself, I finally do it, I'll finally do it, I'll finally do it. And so you keep doing the same thing, and it's like you don't belong there. So I think I've beaten that horse pretty dead at this point. Laura, is there anything else? Any other tangents?
no more tangents. But, like, not enough for me to be able to like repeat what you said. I'm not like, it hasn't been beaten enough into my own head, but maybe for the audience it has.
Hopefully. I'm like, I don't even know what I just said here. Is there anything else that's going on for you this week other than jury duty being changed for you?
Well, I mean, it was Easter weekend, therefore tribal duties. But like one day I was just way too much in my sacral flow, and I was deciding to push through and keep on going and not stop, like not rest. And my body paid for it, and like it's been really tired since, and I've had headaches and just body aches and all the things as a consequence of not knowing when enough is enough. But the thing is, sometimes you like, it's hard. It's like a mental decision when you're in that state because your body is amplifying sacral energy. So you feel like there's more energy in you to do the thing. And it's like this false positive of light and force and life force and energy. And you have to tell yourself, like, just stop because this is not you. And then because you feel it, you're like, oh no, this is me. I have all this energy. I can keep on going. And you can't. So just a little thing of just like not listening to the false positive of the sacral, which
Yeah.
is yeah, always fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think in a sense it is correct for you to be around like because your body is right and you're nervous, like to being like in those kind of highly stimulating environments. But when there's like all of this confusion, and I think that this was one of the lessons too from my this like eclipse slash mercury retrograde week, is that there is when you're inside of a situation that's incorrect for you from soup to nuts, and you're trying to piece apart the nuances of why it's incorrect, it's like without realizing that the entirety of the situation is incorrect, it's like that's when you get yourself spun into knots. And I've done that, when I was I don't even know what the word is, but when I was seeing someone who's the 3-5, it's like I was trying to like put together all the pieces of the puzzle to understand how I needed to be correct within the situation as myself, as I'm deconditioning. And it's like the very initial beginning part of that was incorrect. And so from there, the entire dominoes of the situation was incorrect. And so sometimes it's less about like, okay, like what is the specificity of this that's incorrect for me? And it's like, well, it's the entirety of it, it's the entirety of it that's incorrect. In fact, interesting that you say something about Easter, because I decided to, I was going to go to eat Easter, I guess, breakfast, lunch, dinner with everyone at a club. And my body just totally like, I had like a huge IBS flare up the day of. And even though, I was like, okay, I'm just going to have some soup and I'll have a drink and like I'll have some hot tea, I'll try and, keep my calm determination somewhat in check. My body was just like, nope, we're not going. Like it was just like clamped around me and was like, no, no, no. And I just had a really bad stomach ache the whole day. So that's not really to speak to anything you just said about your sacral being amplified, but it is, or you amplifying the sacral, that makes more sense. But just to say like another example of where it's like your body knows if something's correct, and like the horror for me of like saying that I wasn't going to show up to Easter dinner, like you know what I mean, like I would not have been able to do that 3 years ago. And my dad's birthday is having a surprise party. Oh God, hopefully he's not listening to this. Hopefully he's having a surprise party at some point. I'm not going to say when, but he's not listening. There's no men that listen to this. But there's going to be a me needing to go to New Jersey. I'm in Florida right now at some point, and I realized that I'm like, I have to go. My not self is like, you have to go. You have no choice. Gotta go. Gotta do it. Gotta be a part of it, And whereas in the past, I would have 100% not even questioned the fact that I have to be a part of it. Now I'm like, actually, you don't have to be a part of it, but you're going to be a part of it, even though you don't have to. So there's like a realization that I could create a problem for everyone, and not show up. And it would be okay because whatever, life goes on. People get over things, and it's not the end of the world when you are stick in the mud. And it's not the end of the world when you don't show up to places that you don't belong, even if everyone's expectations on you is different. I am going to be doing the old programs dance for that weekend. And I've decided like that's what it's going to be. So it's just interesting because like having the me not showing up to Easter dinner, like never could I ever have done that in the past. And now I'm like, I've changed, you know, I've mutated. There's been a mutation that's happened where I'm like not as horrified at the thought of letting people down or disappointing people or destroying the expectations that people have of me.
It's interesting. I don't know if it's because like we're women, so we're people pleasers and men don't have such a problem with it. But like my younger brother, he is a manifesting generator, single definition, and he has a mix of I think collective and individual circuitry, but like he doesn't give a shit about anyone's needs. Like he has like no tribal sense. Well, he has some tribal sensitivity, but like if something's incorrect, like he doesn't want to do something, he won't. If he doesn't want to go to some obligation, he won't. And like we put up with it, and we've had to deal with him being like the black sheep of the family of like, oh, Tom is like this or Tom's like that. He doesn't want to do this, he doesn't want to do that. But like he's just been correct as himself.
Yep.
And it's great for him.
Love
And like
it.
sometimes he will have to do things that he doesn't want to do. Like big things in which he can't, I'm going to details, but it's just interesting because like we have such a struggle with it, right? And he just like he doesn't give a rat's ass, and he doesn't care if it hurts people's feelings, and he'll just like do drum, like march to his own drum beat or whatever, and it's totally fine. It's fine,
Mm-hmm.
and it's great, and it's just like I don't know, maybe it's like a womanly thing, um, something
Yeah.
else. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a part of it. That's definitely a part of it. And like, you know, the thing that I realized about men is that they're more likely to be disagreeable and favor what's correct for themselves, but they're also more likely to get caught up in the hierarchical climbing of the not self game in a different way, you know? So, you know, they will put themselves through hell if they, because this is the thing, right? It's like he doesn't want to do something that's incorrect for him. But if, let's say, he has a not self like the rest of us, um, and he wanted to accomplish something, his not self wanted to accomplish something, he would go after that thing, even if it was incorrect for him, you know. So it's like he doesn't want to do it, and it's probably correct that he doesn't want to do it and he's not going to do it, but that doesn't leave him out of doing things that are incorrect for him because his not self is propelling him forward. So it's like the issues are different for sure between the cultural expectations of men versus women, where we are way more likely to be agreeable for no reason. We're way less likely to want to just like be considered the bitch or be considered the weird one or be considered the weirdo. I feel like women are like way more likely to nurture at least like their own soft parts or their own tenderness, as opposed to being like super competitive. Although we all have our own ways to show up in the undefined G. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I was thinking about it in terms of men actually today, like within the hypervigilance. I was thinking about it actually. Why do more men lose their hair than women? And everyone's like, oh, you know, it's just whatever. This is just like how it goes. But I really think it's because men are farther away from their true selves by and large. They're more likely to be disagreeable, but like that disagreeableness could come from their not selves as quickly as it could come from, you know, what's actually correct for them. And so I think that there's like a high, there's like, yeah, there's a competitiveness and a climbingness that men just embody, even if it's not correct for them, because it's what their not self wants. Whereas women, like, we're not, it's like less expected of us to be that bloodthirsty in a way. Not that none of us are. I mean, it's the gender stereotypes are literally just not self little organizational bubbles. There's, of course, some truth to it, but most of the truth comes down to uh, cultural conditioning. There's obviously certain things physically that we have to deal with, but yeah, it's a really interesting, you know, I mean, good for your brother. Like, you know what? He's emotional, right? Like, he's
Yeah.
like the one that can't avoid, and he doesn't have as many years of conditioning on him. And he's just like, and he's a dude, so he's allowed to be disagreeable without all of the horror of the feminine, not self culture around him being like, how could you be disagreeable as a woman, you know? How could you be the black sheep? So, I mean, and you know, he's kind of like a little guru for you then in your house of like, well, he can do it, I can do it. If it's incorrect for me, I'm just going to say no, I can't do this. Period. Sorry, it blows up the expectations you have of me.
Yeah. Um, he's a 2-4 emotional, so most of like his not self comes in when he's acting on his wave, which like
Yeah.
it's interesting to watch and witness of like when he's being emotional and making decisions from that heightened place. And you can see the fallout of like the situation happening there, of like the initiations that are happening. But yeah, at the same time, I feel like, well, most designs are meant to wait. Only 7%, the manifestors, are there to initiate. So it's like with what Ross said with the band too. The yang is really just the yin, pretending to be yang.
Yeah.
Most of us are yin, and like it's just the homogenized way that the world operates. So like we have to lump ourselves into the yang and yin binary, and so the easiest way to do that is through sexual organs and those homogenized characteristics. But yeah, it's just big homogenized soup.
I know,
um,
I know, I know.
but yeah, I
Well,
do look into him as like that inspirational figure of like, if Tom's not here, I don't have to be here either. And I'm just gonna walk to my room and ignore everyone in my house. So it's
yeah.
great.
I mean, but like it's so interesting because I have the same experience because like not only was I the firstborn daughter, were you firstborn? No, you're
No.
second, right?
Well, technically third, but yeah.
Yeah, not only was I the firstborn daughter, but like I was like the golden child. And so, and I was the one that was the harmonizer. I mean, I was making sure that everyone around me was always in good shape or good or, you know, because of that overactive, hypervigilant aura, nervous system constantly checking on everyone and able to do whatever backflips that were necessary in order to make sure that everybody was happy with me, you know. And, you know, we talked about it a little bit with me kind of coming to terms with my own PHS and understanding it and having to go through the perversity of being someone who's disagreeable when it comes to certain things. Like you have to put your foot down for yourself in ways that are going to make other people uncomfortable. And then, you know, you can become less strict or stringent when you start understanding the way that it really works. I'm starting to understand, oh, you know, the calmness, it really comes down to a relaxed nervous system. And that means that everything that I consume is probably going to be consumed better if I am relaxed. And you know that can show up in a lot of different ways. I'm always I not always I think I'm probably always going to like, prefer, and just appreciate eating by myself more. But if there are people around me who understand what I'm doing and know that they really can't have conversations with me while I'm eating and I'm in a calm state, then I'm sure it's fine to eat like that, you know. But you know there are these moments of like having to just like really hard put your foot down in a way so that you can show yourself that the world doesn't blow up when like everybody's pissed off at you, you know, or when you're making people unhappy. Um, which that is a hard one. I mean, I'm so my body is so sensitive to it beyond my mind. Like my mind is very much like fuck you. My body is like, oh, I care about everybody and I'm always paying attention to everybody's auric state. Like my body's just doing that unconsciously. I can't stop it even if I want to. So yeah, I mean it's interesting. The whole masculine feminine dynamic is interesting too, and the way that the different not selves show up is a really interesting trip to just watch in and of itself. Um, but anyway, man, I feel like we entered into a little portal with this conversation because I have no idea how we got here. Like,
Yeah,
however many.
we're like, okay, we're done. And then there's a whole other topic that comes up.
Leave it to me and Laura, everybody. And just to say, wait, Laura, is there anything else that you want to
No.
say? Okay. And just to say, like with the eclipses, just again, as far as it goes, you're going to do, there's no choice. There's no choice. But if you have the mutative potential within you and you want to be yourself, don't make any hasty big life choices during eclipse season. That's just my personal take on it.
You mean don't buy a house the way my sibling just did this week?
Oh my God. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Um Oh
Or
my
Buster who didn't wait out 28 days, you mean?
Oh my God. Well, you're gonna watch that. Really quick, really quick. Um, Something interesting. I think Joey sent it to me actually, who's the person that introduced me and Laura. So gotta love him for that. But something interesting about uh astrology that I've noticed is that like you're less likely to be like as beholden to the transits when you're conscious of them than you are when you're unconscious. And so it's like all kinds of people are going to make major, major life decisions right during this time because they're not self and they don't understand the mechanics. Like all kinds of people. In fact, even myself, with 2 years of deconditioning under my belt during an eclipse, made some really bad decisions. So
That's
it's
totally
not.
logical. Think about it like the neutrino oceans moving through those gates and giving you a sense of definition that you don't have. And it's affecting your thought patterns because neutrinos are consciousness, therefore they are thought. Therefore, you're thinking things
Yeah.
about who you are and where your life is going. And then you're not self, so you're going to make mental choices. Like it totally makes sense. It's totally logical why if we're not aware of the transits, why we're like beholden to them.
Or even when we are aware of them, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, even when we are aware of them, we're still making dumb decisions. And I can only hope that the people that, I can only hope for myself that um, I just get a little bit more wise every time that we have these heightened energetics. And I feel like this was a big, for me, like it's been such a process with what ended up happening, which it was 2022, but I think it was November of 2022. I had a progressed new moon on my natal Venus. And then now the eclipses have been activating my natal Venus, and now Mercury retrogrades over my natal Venus. And so there's been like a lot of stuff going on with that 42nd gate for me. And it just made me realize the thing that I said to you all today, which is that like not my monkeys, not my circus. Like Sarah, if you want to be who it is you are, you have to stop entering into games that require you to be who it is that you're not. So I will leave y'all with that. Anyway,
Like, follow, subscribe, do the things that you do. Thanks
yes.
for listening and being here with us if you've stuck around to the end.
And yes, we will talk to you next week post eclipse, unless we feel froggy and want to talk on the eclipse.
We make no promises.
No promises here with our undefined G's. All right, Laura.
Catch you on the flip side. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.